All right. So recently, the PlayStation Classic has been announced, and I know it's been quite a bit since it's been announced. And the reason I'm saying this so late is because I like to think on stuff and actually kind of focus it in my head and make sure I'm not overstepping boundaries or stuff like that. And so that's why it's kind of late. But I wanted to kind of chime in on this a little bit. I made sure to write a little note, a couple notes here and there, but of just my thoughts throughout the week. Now, the PlayStation Classic, if you don't know, is coming out December 3rd this year. It's going to be $100. You get two controllers, which is very nice. It's nice to see two controllers. It allows you to play with maybe a brother, a friend, maybe relive those glory days. Really nice to see two controllers. And it sounds kind of almost a given, but as we saw with the NES Classic, which I'll be harkening back to that and the SNES Classic quite a bit, we didn't see a second controller with the NES Classic and got scalped pretty hard, and it was just a terrible nightmare during that. But the two controllers are nice. Non-analog, which means they are using the classic controller that came with the system originally. I believe 1997 is when analog was introduced or released for the first time. Or around that time, because I'm pretty sure Metal Gear Solid came out the next year after. You get, of course, an HDMI cord. Those come with everything nowadays. I mean, I have more HDMI cords than pencils in my house. Ridiculous at this point. Expected. It comes with the basic type of classics system that we've seen twice already in Nintendo. We've seen it with At Games Sega stuff they always push out, which so you get like the suspend points or save points or whatever you want to call it. There's apparently a type of virtual memory card that allows you to save and switch on the go type thing, from what I gather. The system itself is 45% of the original system, the size comparison, so it's about half. We'll just round it to half. It's not that big of a deal. Um, Overall, it's actually a little smaller than I would probably gather. I'm not sure if I enjoy it being that small or if I like it. I don't know. I would have to probably hold it and maybe play on my little shelf somewhere. Maybe see how it looks. Uh, but what really matters here is the games, and I'm gonna get into that in one last second because there is something I want to talk about with the the non-inclusion of the AC adapter for the system. There's no AC adapter in the whole entire box. When you order for $100, you do not get a type of adapter for the wall, so you can't plug it in and play without one of those. People call them nubs, or they call them AC adapters, but you basically just plug in USB and you use it probably for your phone or a DS charger if you've seen them. The NES Classic, SNES Classic have their own. The Switch, you've seen it. Everyone has a lot of them. If you've been in the gaming scene for any amount of time, you probably have four or five. And I'm not saying that most people will not have them. I am saying that it's kind of a terrible decision to leave it out because you've alienated maybe a group of people that want to jump back into video games and wanted to jump back in the first console they played, the PlayStation. And they're like, yeah, I could get this for $100. And then they see that they have to buy a little tiny thing because they don't have one in their house magically or something like that. And they're like, extra $5. And it's like, well, I have to do two orders or I have to do separate shipping because there's so many variables here. And it's just another step. And it's kind of confusing that we see Sony willing to create another step for an easy sell here. I because PlayStation fanboys are going to buy this up, collectors are going to buy it up and probably scalp it like usual, and like even like gamers that never played the PlayStation will buy this to try out the games. And it's confusing to me that you would alienate almost a part of your audience that maybe hasn't played a video game since the PlayStation 1. They've gone out and had a kid and they're like, man, I could get this for my kid and play with him. That would be amazing. It's similar to the NES Classic and SNES Classic type of mentality, where I can get this for my kid and I could play and enjoy it. And it's kind of weird that the AC adapter is not included. I'm not saying it breaks it for me, but personally, I really feel it's an oddity where it's not included. It's almost, I would call it a fuck up. It really is $100 and you can't give me an AC adapter of some sort or a type of nub to plug into it. It's a fuck up. That's what it is. $100 and you can't give me that. It costs you like 50 cents to freaking make. It's a little ridiculous. But let's get into the most important part. I've been rambling for 6 minutes already on not video games. But let's get into the 5 games that were announced. So we have Final Fantasy VII, obvious. Very obvious. I mean, it's Final Fantasy VII. You have Jumping Flash. I'm not really sure on that one. It's alright. Ridge Racer Type 4. It's not the racing game I would pick, but it also makes sense when you think about the next game. And you have Tekken 3, which is a Namco game, and Ridge Racer Type 4 being a Namco game. I understand why they both appear there. And Tekken 3 is actually a very good pick. Very good pick. I think it's actually only appeared in PlayStation 1. Or I keep calling it the PlayStation 1, but the PlayStation. I think it's been limited pretty heavily to the PlayStation. I don't know if it appeared later. There might have been versions of it later, but I don't remember that much. It's kind of... Yeah, I can't think of them off the top of my head. And then we have Wild Arms, which is actually a very good pick, but also an odd pick, and I'll get into it while I describe these 5 games. So, let's start with Final Fantasy VII. It's pretty obvious why it's there. The only problem I have with it being where it is that it's readily available on almost every console. There's several of them, several different copies you can get for PS4. So, it kind of eliminates the need for this game to be on this classic. It really doesn't represent a need. And it's kind of... I don't know, it's kind of hurting it just by having Final Fantasy VII there. And there's another Final Fantasy game I'm going to talk about later, which I feel like could have gone there that would have done better. So, but we'll get to it. I understand why it's there. It's iconic. Okay, I get that. Jumping Flash, it's a platformer. I understand why it's there as a platformer, though it's not the most recognizable game. And that's the type of marketing type of stance I usually try and take with the classics. Will the basic consumer be able to pick out these games? I don't really care if some guy is able to name all 400 top selling PlayStation games of all time and throw them in a list and then figure out which genre is best. It doesn't matter. It's what the consumer, the basic consumer who maybe doesn't play video games that often, or maybe plays a little bit, dabbles in sports games, whatever, something along those lines, where he can see a game and go, wow, I love that game. I remember it. And usually you remember the games most talked about, and those are usually the best selling or the bigger series, in case Final Fantasy VII. So it's kind of weird to see Jumping Flash be here when you could have Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot. Those two are big name sellers already. And it's just kind of weird to see it. I guess maybe a nostalgic type of pull, but it's a little bit of a stretch. Ridge Racer Type 4. I've already pretty much explained why it's here. It's kind of a Namco type deal, I'm guessing. I feel it's kind of not the best racing game for it. I could think Gran Turismo, even though maybe not Gran Turismo. Not the first one. Maybe, I don't know, it's kind of a stretch, so to say. for a racing game, so I guess it's not bad. Gran Turismo 2 did come out on the PlayStation, so I'm surprised that isn't there, but maybe it will be. There's not a lot of games to go around for it. Tekken 3, it's a good pick. Tekken 3 is probably the best pick on here, and it's because it's recognizable. It's an awesome fighting game, and it's not readily available in other areas of the market. It really is kind of it's kind of like the launch title you want for this. It really is. And the next one is Wild Arms, which if you haven't played is a very good RPG. It is kind of weird though, because Wild Arms, while it is well known in RPG circles, and it's even out of those circles, it's pretty well known for its cool style, and heck, you could probably just look it up on YouTube and find several hundred videos explaining why it's such a cool design. And overall, the music is pretty decent, the characters are cool, and stuff like that, and it goes on and on. But it's kind of weird to see it because it's not a type of crowd pleaser like Final Fantasy VII is. Wild Arms is kind of a niche, so to say. It fits a lot of RPG players, yes, but it doesn't fit a general audience as far as Final Fantasy VII does. But I am a fan of Wild Arms, so I'm not going to pick on it too much. And those were the 5 announced, and I'm going to get into the games they might put in, which they should. They're really good games, and I would like to see some of them in there. But it's weird that they didn't announce all 20 games. I'm just going to mention it. It seems almost like they're hesitant to release all 20 games. Maybe they're trying to build up hype, or maybe something along those lines. But when you start off with Final Fantasy VII, Wild Arms, you please the RPG fanatic inside me. Tekken 3, my fighting game is covered. Jumping Flash, my platformer side is kind of disappointed, to be honest. And Ridge Racer Type 4, I suck at racing games, but I could play it. You filled a certain need here, but I'm missing the platformer side for me and several others, like, solid games. And so I'm kind of hip and hopping around the fence for this console. It's kind of like this classic. I keep calling it a console, but this classic is kind of just, it's kind of like too far. At $100, you're thinking $5 a game. And in my head, I don't think Jumping Flash is worth $5. I don't think it is. But whatever. It's just a weird choice to not announce all 20 games, or maybe announce more than 5, because that's only 1/4 of the library, and to be honest, I refuse to buy it based on 1/4 of the library. Not going to do it. So, let's get into some possible games. Let's start with Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid, if you don't know, is a fantastic series. Pretty good. Owned by Konami. Could be some licensing issues, though I doubt it. Konami's willing to sell $1,000 for pennies at this moment. Great action adventure type of stealth game. Though without the analog on the controllers, I don't see it being that great of a kind of game on it. So I'm not sure if it would really work on there. Probably not, to be honest. So with the analog kind of out, it would be a great game though. Metal Gear Solid is kind of in collections every now and then, and in odd console choices. So it might be, I don't know, it'd probably be a great crowd pleaser to see as Metal Gear Solid, especially with how hit or miss the recent Metal Gears have been. Another one, Konami, of course. Konami owns all the great stuff. And Symphony of the Night. Even if they put this here, I'm going to explain this real quick. If you don't know what Symphony of the Night is, it's a Castlevania game. Action-adventure RPG, platformer. There's a lot of genres put into it. Great game. Awesome gameplay. It's probably one of my favorites on the PlayStation. And I'll even set mine up every now and then and just pop it in and play it every couple years. I'll probably play it thoroughly through it. And it's owned by Konami again, which they would probably just give the license away. Konami. Ugh. But it to me it's kind of weird because Symphony of the Night and I believe Rondo of Blood has been announced for PlayStation 4 already. So that eliminates it. Like, even if you think about it, okay, I get the PlayStation Classic and Symphony of the Night is there. Well, in October, we already get it on the PS4. So there's already overlap. And if you have too much overlap, such as Final Fantasy VII, Symphony of the Night, and maybe a few other games, it's not worth it. You're basically paying $100 for maybe 10 games because of so much overlap everywhere. And it's not worth it. And it's just kind of weird to me that we've had this announcement lately of Symphony of the Night being released in October when it's a possible game, or probably now not possible, for the Sony Classic. It's very weird. Another game, Silent Hill, again, Konami. This one might be a little harder to swing because Silent Hill has kind of been, what's the word, buried? Yeah, I'd probably go with buried. But it would be a great thing. Survival horror game. There's another survival horror game I could think of that I'll get to later that could probably match this in just sales and also notability. But when it comes down to it, I feel like Silent Hill would get more presence on it. And I'll get to why later when I come back for a comparison. I feel like you need Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. 2 or 3. Probably 3. I think 3 is more memorable to some people. But 2 could also work pretty well. You could probably even put 1. Though the licensing is going to be pretty hard, though, with how much of a failure the last one was. It might be an easier sell than you could think. But, we'll see. So, another one would probably be Tomb Raider. I expect a Tomb Raider on here. Especially since we've had all this hype built for the type of trilogy we've had recently with Tomb Raider, Res Tomb Raider, and Shadow of Tomb Raider. It would be kind of a nice throwback. I don't know which one you would put in there. Personally, I'd probably go Tomb Raider 2 because I'm pretty sure that's probably the most bought on the PlayStation. Though the original Tomb Raider could also work, get fans into the series. Maybe one of the Tomb Raiders would work. They're not very that story driven. They're just cool games. I actually think a Tomb Raider is almost required for this. I'll be shocked if it's not there. Spyro the Dragon, I mentioned it earlier, along with Crash Bandicoot. I feel like you need one of these, and this again goes back to overlap. We see that Crash Bandicoot is already in the Insane Trilogy everywhere. It's on Xbox, it's on Switch. I mean, it's on the Switch right next to me. PlayStation 4, I should be specific there. It's everywhere, and Spyro the Dragon's about to join it in every console, so there's a lot of overlap here for those platformers, and for the life of me, I can't think of that many platformers after that recognize it besides another Crash game or another Spyro game. There weren't that many platformers on there that I can think of. It's kind of, I mean, you could, I'm trying to think of one, and off the top of my head, I can't. So, maybe I'm just forgetting one. Maybe I'll come back to it. But there's a lot of overlap here. And here's the game that I thought could replace Final Fantasy VII for Final Fantasy fans. It's Final Fantasy Tactics. And if you've never played it, it is a tactical RPG and is probably one of the best games I've ever played. It really is great. And the reason I say Final Fantasy Tactics over Final Fantasy VII, even though Final Fantasy VII reaches a broader audience and overall just the crazier fans, Final Fantasy Tactics reaches something that it reaches a big fan base and it doesn't have that much overlap. Yeah, there are other Final Fantasy Tactics games out there, and there's, I believe, the first Final Fantasy Tactics had a type of bundle later in life. I don't remember, maybe the Nintendo DS, I don't know the exact console, but it it's not as prominent of Final Fantasy VII. It's on multiple consoles. It's not on the PS4, and it would work. It's a great, great game, and Final Fantasy fans would be just as hyped for that, most of them, over Final Fantasy VII because of the overlap with PS4. It's just kind of lacking. I feel like maybe Final Fantasy Tactics could sell this a little bit better, but we'll see. I think I mentioned Gran Turismo, though. Now that I think of it, probably the second one would be better. I don't remember much of Final Fantasy, Gran Turismo, that fondly. Another one. This is back to kind of the Silent Hill comparison. Resident Evil 1 or 3. And I say this leaving out 2, even though it's my favorite for a specific reason. Because of the release of the remake of Resident Evil 2 coming out later this year, it would be kind of weird to have Resident Evil 2 also on the PlayStation Classic. It wouldn't really work, in my opinion. It could if you force it, but unless you're throwing in Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, I don't see why. I really don't see why you would put 2 when there's a remake coming out. And it's also, kind of readily available. Again. When it comes to it, I'd probably like to see 3 because Resident Evil 1 had a remaster or a remake, whatever you want to call it, quite recently, within the past half decade about. So, overall, well, it had a port. Should be specific on that. But overall, I'd rather see Silent Hill, mostly because Silent Hill, I feel like it doesn't have enough presence and overlap with other consoles. It could have a nice niche slot here and be a great survival horror game. But also, it would kind of be a cool idea to maybe put Resident Evil, one of them. I'd probably go with 3, to be honest, because it's the most... Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is on very few consoles. Kind of spread it, and it would kind of draw in more deep gamers that are looking to play games, not collect. It would kind of be cool to see Silent Hill and Resident Evil 3, though if they pick one, I don't think they're going to pick the other. It's just a feeling I got. I feel like we're going to see a lot of RPGs come out. And here are the 2 big RPGs I want to see personally. They're probably not going to be on it, especially... No, I'm not going to say too much on it. I don't want to overstep my boundaries. But these are the 2 I really want. I want to see Xenogears, which is a great RPG. If you haven't seen it, check out a video on YouTube. Really good. If you're an RPG fan, you deserve to play it. Chrono Cross is also a great RPG. Sounds familiar? Chrono Trigger, same series type thing. Okay? Now, those are all the games I wrote down personally that I would like to see or should be on it. In my opinion, Final Fantasy Tactics should be on it. A Crash Bandicoot game should be on it. Spyro the Dragon should be on it. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 or 3 should be on it, and stuff like that. Now, when it comes to other games that could be on it, I really don't know. There's some few games that would work on it. I could think of maybe the Namco Museum type games because you already have a type of... It seems to be a partnership with Namco, though Namco just kind of licenses this out now. Maybe one of those for a nice silly game, kind of... Because Namco Museum came out in volumes. I believe it went up to Volume 3. Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. I have 1 and 2. I don't think I have 3. But, I don't know. It might be a nice little game to kind of, throw back to them. Would be pretty good. Another game I don't think they're going to put in, but I would like to see is probably Twisted Metal 1 or 2. Would be pretty cool. If you can get Konami on board, maybe one of the Yu-Gi-Oh games that came out during the time. I believe Forbidden Memories was the one that sold the most. I don't know exact numbers on that, but whatever. Another option is probably Legacy of Kain. That whole series is pretty good. It's not super, super good, but it's decent enough that it would probably bring in some people. And I would really like to see some crazy stuff actually. Like one of the things that I thought was amazing to see on the SNES Classic that actually drew me to buy one was the fact that they put Earthbound on it. It's yeah, it's now a rare game and it still is a rare game, but it's also not publicly like that out there. Like when you think of Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario World, you think of other stuff like Super Metroid, Super Punch Out maybe. And that's kind of in the meh territory of obscure for the public knowledge. You don't think of Earthbound. You just don't. Like it's not in there as a popular game to the general public. For gamers, yes. RPG fanatics, yes. Collectors, yes. General populace, it doesn't really sell. It doesn't. And you can argue that the classic systems are made for fans, but at the end of the day, they're hoping to sell this for $100 in the PlayStation Classics case. And I there's a couple other games I can mention here. Medal of Honor, I believe, came out on it. You need a shooter here. Like I'm trying to think, maybe a Harry Potter game, though that licensing is going to be a bitch. Um, a Dragon Quest game, or Dragon Warrior as it would be called. Maybe another Final Fantasy. Like, there's a lot of games that could be here, but there's a lot of overlap, and that's the issue I'm having with it. I'm looking at a game list of the most sold on the PlayStation, which is not usually what I like to do, but Also, it would be amazing because it's probably the first game I played on the PlayStation. I didn't really get one till way late. Actually, long after the console died, to be honest. Was Monopoly. That was the only one I played with my older brother at the time. Like, even though it's just stupid, I would really love to see it. I'll probably pull it out and play Monopoly now after this. But there's a couple of games that I could see, but there's a lot of racing games. There's a lot of RPGs. There's a specific amount of platformers, and that's the issue here. There's not a lot of great shooters. There's really not. There's not a lot of great puzzle games, though I think there was a Mahjong game from what I remember in Japan that was really good. I think I have the import somewhere. There's not a lot of just like genre busters in all the genres, and I think this is gonna hurt the the classic ultimately. 20 games, $100, $5 a game, and without stepping out into some dangerous territory with Silent Hill, maybe, or maybe Xenogears, or some collector type base, and also trying to hit the general populace with Spyro and Crash Bandicoot, Final Fantasy VII, that stuff. I don't see how this is gonna sell well. It probably will sell well just based on the fact of collectors, but I don't see how this is gonna be one thing that's sought after. One of the things that is important is the fact it would be sought after by the general public and collectors. Right now, all I see is stuff for collectors. I don't see much for the general populace. Plus, there's no AC adapter, which is fucking stupid. But I think I'm gonna end it there. Kind of a rambling session for freaking half hour. It's kind of my thoughts on it. Overall, I want to see it do well. I'm a big fan of PlayStation, but I mean, I own all 4 consoles. But overall, the lack of analog suffers a lot of the games on here. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Metal Gear Solid suffers, of course, from it the most, in my opinion. AC adapter is kind of confusing. Or a lack of a power type cord. Not cord, but nub, whatever you want to call it. And the games that were chosen are... I agree with 4 of them, pretty much. Ridge Racer Type 4 is probably the one I least agree with. Out of the 4, while Jumping Flash I don't agree with at all. I'd rather see a Spyro there. which is stupid to say, but yeah, Crash Bandicoot would have been better as well. Maybe it would have been cool to see Crash Bandicoot Warped, but or Crash Bandicoot 3 if you don't know what I'm saying. Um, I I don't see this being nearly as well as the NES Classic and the SNES Classic at all. And it's kind of disappointing because it would be cool to set up a bunch of classics down the line, even though it's terrible for the video game market. But set up classics down the line and be able to plug them all into one TV and be like, you want to play PlayStation? No? How about NES? No? Sega Genesis? Oh, alright, we'll play some Sega Genesis. Or how about maybe down the line we get an N64 classic or something like that. We can play some Superman 64 and cry ourselves to sleep on that. But I like the idea of a classic console, but I like the idea of a good classic console more. And I don't see this as of right now being worth my money of $100, which to some people is a lot, to some it's a little, but it doesn't matter. It's still $100 that I'm not getting an analog controller, and I have no confirmation of whether I'm getting anything better than Tekken 3 and Wild Arms, because Final Fantasy 7 can be bought on the PS4, and it's kind of a holdover title at this point. I don't see it as important. So I'm basically, as of right now, going in blind, paying $100 for what could be Tekken 3, Wild Arms, 3 games that I already talked about that are meh, and then the other 15 blind games that could be all pretty crappy, or they could be just kind of trash, or they could be good. It's gambling. I hope to see more. If we do see a little bit more information, I'll probably maybe make a video on it, on the updates, and see how it changes my mind. But as of right now, I don't see paying $100 for this. And I hope you think about it. If you're a big PlayStation fan, is this worth $100? Or maybe you should save that $100 and spend it into collecting a type of retro PlayStation collection. Maybe that would be cool. Maybe you'll get some stuff to show off and play. Make sure you always play your games. Just a personal preference. Alright, so I'm going to leave this where it is. And hopefully I'll see you in another video, and till then and all that. You know.